There was one time when I envied those who had places of their own, spaces to inhabit, and a copy of Alien to watch at any time. That was living. That was the Gen X geek paradise I was sold by certain portions of the old IMDb forums. It is paradise. One doesn't realize it is paradise, not because they don't appreciate Alien, but because they've taken for granted that feeling of ultimate agency, wherein you could move around your space and not worry about those who inhabit it with you. One's family restricts their freedoms to some degree, rightfully so at one time or sometimes. Even roommates can potentially cause a havoc depending on whom one moves in with, and significant others, there's a whole lot that has to be considered when you're the kind of guy who likes to pop on Alien at any given time. They'll judge you for it, but you can't blame them. Alien is too good. Like Psycho, a film I could also pop on at any time, to the disturbance of many I am sure, Alien is a realization of a fully formed and believable lived-in, breathing horror environment. Psycho was more stylized, downstream of noir tendencies to some extent, whereas Alien was as fastidiously authentic and animated a depiction of a future dread, the frightening, horrifying possibilities of space travel in the years yet to come. If Psycho still had to operate and then tear itself right out of, bludgeon its way out of, the old Hollywood parameters of dramas or thrillers, Alien did so, burst out of, yes. The more sterile, serious, clinical futures of Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, the tradition downstream which included Andromeda Strain, Silent Running, Logan's Run, or even Solaris, and combined with the dirtier, grungier aesthetic featured in 1977's Star Wars, evidently. Whereas the mystical utopian transcendentalism of Kubrick's 2001 and or the space opera good versus evil traditionalism of Star Wars offered escape, wonder, and hope, Alien's future was cyber-gothic, a distillation of the inevitable, an encounter with a perfect predatory organism which, given the fragility of travelling through space as a nominally planet-bound life form, rendered us, its victims, rather very helpless. There was something akin, or reminding me of, anyway, Mr. H.P. Lovecraft here, but not because of the loftiness or the alternative proposed mythology to the Earth-originated gods, as opposed to the Cthulhu or Old Ones as the true supernatural entities of this universe, but due to this idea that an atheistic, clinical scientific worldview still holds vast and terrible dangers far scarier and more unsettling than anything which haunted us about the Judeo-Christian ruminations on mortality and the prospective afterlife or the apocalypses. The idea that some blood-curdling creature unknown to our species could inhabit the oceans is a horrifying one, and not overly unrealistic, as we have oceans. We haven't explored them all, and never could plausibly, although you would assume we would have seen something like that by now. The point is, one doesn't need to believe in any religion or a spiritual belief system in order to be frightened of that. It belongs to a reality. Someone raised in a totally atheistic worldview might not find Poe or other ghost fiction very impactful or otherwise scary because they were not raised with, for example, a Christian worldview wherein ghosts from the afterlife was not assumed to be totally impossible. There was a heaven, hell, and souls, so why not, possibly? I wonder to what degree those who weren't raised with the belief that Catholicism and the education one receives about this universe in a Catholic context, mildly so in my case, but still one takes what adults say very, very seriously as a small child, of course, can find The Exorcist, William Friedkin's film, unsettling or disturbing. That film takes place in that world where Catholicism was a totally real description of how this universe worked. Anyone who was raised Catholic knows exactly what I am talking about. You believe this stuff flat out and wholeheartedly, because everyone around you does, and they're all older than you. Why would they be lying or wrong in any case? Now, something in space. No one denies space, no one serious does, so whilst the ghost of an old lady whose husband died at sea might not frighten you, there's no such thing as ghosts. There is potentially such thing as an extraterrestrial life form which parasitically uses our species as a host to evolve another species in of itself, and it looks like something out of one of H.R. Giger's nightmares. Even if you don't find that scary, you really want to see that movie in any case, and at any instant. So let's move on now. Let me discuss the comparison to Psycho just a little bit more now. Yes, Psycho did operate within the known parameters of traditional high-budgeted Hollywood staging, a static camera, mostly. Hitchcock obviously manoeuvred his frame more than most at this time, it would be said. Stars speaking with a monotone seriousness, mildly didactic, functional and vaguely rigid, operating as a moving play, more interested in enacting scripts than, say, illustrating them. No film for film's sake. Film as a means to communicate a message narrative of a novel or stage play, usually, more or less. And this all culminating in what one could consider the first murder in Hollywood history in some respects. Instead of insinuating a death, a gunshot, and an actor then falling, Hitchcock, as though he were an actual murderous sadist, gleefully displays his illusion of a real murder. Look what I did, who would dare do that? Like a serial slaughterer showing off the trophies and prizes in their basement. The shower scene, and relying on clever edits and emphasis on the quasi-experimental extremes of montage, removing film further from its theatrical imprisonment then, disorienting an audience's understanding perception of the surrounding time frame, and in communicating the consciousness, nervous system of a confused, distraught victim in disarray, something no words, or even shots of Maria Falconetti, could communicate. The medium was vital, and manipulating the medium was vital, as though it were one's own sense of order or reason to then convince oneself to commit such an act, a hypothetical homicide, say, or just otherwise. These were the inevitable ripples on that sequence's execution, be it these senses, preferences to how it had to be enacted, Hitchcock or the editor George Tomasini just deciding on what was effective rhythmically, or them figuring that going further would be too tasteless even for this morbid project. Still, that lended it to ultimately being shaped and composed as it is. When I invoke Falconetti, what I'm saying there is it's something that a brilliant performance could also be captured. Maria Falconetti could have theoretically given just as powerful a performance on the stage, and Dreyer captures it magnificently in his Passion of Joan of Arc film, or, well, at least we can tell from the outtakes of it that exist today. That's actually, you probably know about the case of that picture, but it's something that sheer performance, even if Janet Leigh was was a talented actress, and she was to some degree certainly, it's the manipulation of the medium itself, something which, you can have a great performance on stage, you can have a great performance on film, but on stage you couldn't utilize the editing schema which made Psycho the incomparable, iconic moment, that shower scene that it is. The shower scene and Psycho in general are relevant because, firstly, Alien's chestburster scene is extremely comparable in multiple ways, but also because they elevate pretty standard on-paper tropes into the finest demonstrations of what film is capable of, by elevating the potentially mundane, what is Psycho's plot synopsis really, into filmic imagination, experimentation, exploration of the form itself. This Roger Corman-esque plot about a creepy monster sneaking around aboard an earthbound spaceship was transformed into one of the most precise, pulsating, considered horror films of all time up to that point, and even to this day, one could argue, I may argue even, a horror film from Kubrick, who delivered one the next year, or Tarkovsky, or John Borman, whose career was headed in this direction, and interrupted by the response to Exorcist 2, an underappreciated, if not inferior, sequel to the aforementioned astonishing classic. And Borman's work offers this kind of highly elaborate, detailed frames of crisp, juicy photography. Certainly his next three films demonstrated this quite ably overall, Borman's, and a great attention given apparently to highly lush and evocative imagery, a cinematographic focus on inducing an acceptance, and also a great wondrous awe from the prospective audience, subsequently mesmerized, I would assume anyhow. That's the effect of those great John Borman films, and it's also the effect of Alien, I feel. Alien was so heavily funded as Jaws meets Star Wars, but the sheer magnitude of its photographic accomplishment was initially possible. Alien is an example of when being able to really sell an idea, a profitable venture, can coincide with a major artistic vision or creative quest. In this case, it began as Dan O'Bannon attempting to compose a creature feature in space based upon World War II stories of gremlins, apparently. And this came to more fruition and relevance later, quite obviously, yes. But also utilising the creative team that is still assembled, but now no longer being paid or working on anything, after the failed attempt to film Jodorowsky's Dune adaptation, would have been just spellbinding, I'm sure, although that film didn't reach anything close to production stages. That documentary is really quite great, the 2013 one released by Frank Pavich, but its existence and energy overall imply, even when it states otherwise more than once and doesn't directly claim this outright, that it was so close, but the plug was pulled just before they could finish the project up. And that's not really the case. In the case of Alien, even though they had that team and Dan O'Bannon's idea, it was really obviously Ridley Scott, a directorial auto-genius, well, of other people's visions, but alas, he made them iconic, memorable, and brilliant cinema. Just maybe not an auteur via some definitions, I don't know. Scott elevated the Alien screenplay with Kubrickian execution to the point that eventually it was considered worth mentioning near the finest films from Stanley himself, or Tarkovsky, or at least among the best sci-fi and horror films, which Kubrick had accomplished both, and Tarkovsky too had accomplished twice then for science fiction. Kubrick twice as well with sci-fi, actually, with Clockwork Orange also. Alien is a perfect picture, I could say. A basic functional horror film realised to the 101% degree, as Psycho was, though that was set on Earth, this one is in space. Kubrick sought to do that with the horror bracket, turn it up to 101%, all of that thing, with supernatural haunted place fiction and Stephen King's The Shining. That film was genius, we all know that, but Alien might still be the best horror film or sci-fi film or just movie in general ever made. Well, maybe not, but I feel like saying that. It might be my favourite. I know about Blade Runner, I know about 2001, I have videos on both, but I love Alien a lot too. Maybe it is the best film ever. Alien is certainly my go-to film. That's my claim now. Good to be back. I'll be going away again. Actually, I'll be back sporadically, but you better really enjoy my nonsense ramblings about films, because there'll be no screen caps for a while, just posters and voiceovers. And if you don't like that or have a problem with it, that's exclusive to you. I don't use gimmicks in my videos, experimental video art efforts aside, let's say. If you want to see the film, see the film. I'll display still images of the film or the poster. Hopefully my words will speak for themselves, improvised or typed. In this case typed, but playfully and with fun intent. Alien, too good, really. What an accomplishment. I am jealous forever and always of Ridley Scott's Alien 1979. What a masterpiece. Thanks again, friends. Appreciate it very much. Have a spectacular day, all of you. Go watch Alien. You may as well.